Okay, James.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Portsmouth Coffee Talks Evening Edition. And here we are again on a Thursday evening, and welcome. And we again have another special guest, as we always do in our morning shows and evening shows. A special guest, and Leah's going to introduce him in a little while. But here's what's strange about it. When I was doing my homework on this young man, I found out that he was someone that spoke at our Civic League function as even a younger man back in 2017, I believe. We're guessing on that, but it was around that time. And he was someone that we wanted a young speaker. We wanted a young speaker for our scholarship program, where we were giving out scholarships to young deserving high school students. And our president, Elvell Johnson, found this young man, and he came there and did a magnificent job. Even had us, that more seasoned people, inspired with his message. So I'm glad to have him here. We talked earlier how things go full circle, and I remember him back then, and here he is now on Portsmouth Coffee Talks Evening Edition to share more information with us. Leah?
Okay, James, I'm just checking something here. Okay, it is on. Okay, I need to change one thing here before we get started.
Okay.
Edit my privacy here to make it public.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, James and Minister Jones. It is indeed my honor to introduce to some, and to others may know our guest on this evening, and none other than Minister Michael L. Jones. I've been privileged to work with Michael with the reentry program for the Sheriff's Office. And so I know him pretty well. And we've been on panels together in reference to reentry. But I'd like to share with you a little information about Michael Jones. Michael has a BSW in social work from Norfolk State University. He's an associate minister. Oh, Cap Chapman is coming in. Just 1 minute. I do apologize to those on Facebook, but
From Hawaii. From Hawaii.
Coming in from Hawaii. We should be there with him.
No, I'll be there Saturday.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Saturday.
Okay, so once again, Michael L. Jones Sr., BSW, is an associate minister at Union United Church of Christ in Norfolk, Virginia. Under the leadership of Pastor Hugo J. Morrison, Minister Jones earned his undergraduate degree from the Ethelyn R. Strong School of Social Work at Norfolk State University, and is in the process of completing his final year he has just completed his final years, his master's in divinity at the Samuel D. Witt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University. Minister Jones has nearly 10 years of diverse experience working in the human service field with at-risk persons and families. Minister Jones has had the good fortune to be employed in both the Responsible Fatherhood and Strengthening Fathers program through the UP Center. In 2018, he forged a partnership with the Oak Foundation, OAT, to create and facilitate a peer support group for female survivors of sexual trauma. Through the Oak Foundation and Hampton Roads Legacy, his tutoring and mentoring service, Minister Jones has also co-developed an HBCU college tour scholarship program and has co-facilitated various programs. In addition to operating his own small tutoring and mentoring service, Hampton Roads Legacy, Minister Jones currently serves as the coordinator of A Father's Footprint, the Fatherhood Support Division of the Healthy Start, Loving Steps Start Home Visiting Program in partnership with Eastern Virginia Medical School. Now, as I stated before, we have been blessed at the Portsmouth Sheriff's Office, and as much as Minister Jones has come in when we had just before COVID, and he worked with our young men on fatherhood. And I recently was at a conference that the Oak Foundation gave in Newport News, and he gave a presentation on unraveling fatherhood. And I tell you, we have all been amazed with Minister Jones. And first of all, we want to congratulate him on his graduation from Samuel DeWitt Proctor School on last week. Congratulations.
Thank
and
you
getting
very
that
much.
Master's of Divinity.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Minister Jones. But Minister Jones, we're so happy to have you here today because we've been spending time this month talking about mental health and mental health awareness. Last Thursday, we had my granddaughter on who talked about her mental health project that she had going on at North Carolina A&T University. And I knew that to continue in unraveling this mental health piece, we needed to have you on to talk about the male aspects of this mental health piece, because, you know, often, especially with Black males, they don't like to deal with the mental health issues. They kind of like to shove it in the background. And so we're just so happy to have you here on today. And I don't know if Colonel has an opening statement, or James, or we can just let you have an opening statement. Which is it, fellas? Colonel, do you have anything to say?
Well, since you let me have the table there, the floor, I'll take that floor.
Thank you.
Yes. But Michael, it's an honor to have you out there. I'm proud to see you out there, especially when I see the youth of America. And I call you part of the youth because anybody that is a day younger than I is youth. So you could use that with, you know, when you're out there. So, but you know, the whole debate on fatherhood has been, we've been debating this for decades now. And the Confederates of this country, meaning the right, will also, you know, what I call the Republican Party, what is basically the Confederate Party of the country, talks about when we debate the absent fathers, and especially and they always look for, when they say absent fathers, they look at fathers of us, people of color. And so what would you tell that young father that's gotten this young girl pregnant, and what to do? What kind of counseling would you do, or talking to them, especially as we come to this debate over abortion and everything else?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, honestly, is we have to address the narrative. And you're absolutely right. When we look at fatherlessness and the risk of fatherlessness in terms of the Black community, we see that over the last 50 or so years, probably since the Moynihan report, we've looked at, they say, anywhere between 60 and 90%, depending on the year and the data, of African-American homes are female-led, right? That doesn't actually take into account the activity of the father. So when we look at fathers and we look at this data, we typically will look at poor, young, or uneducated fathers. Mm-hmm. All of us know a family in the projects, right? Every single one of us knows a family in the projects. And we know a family in the projects where the dad has a charge, probably from something like selling weed, right? And because of this charge, he spent some time incarcerated. Now he has a felony and he can't legally live in the projects with his girlfriend, his wife, or the quote unquote baby mama. We know this exists in all Black communities and all projects across the country. Dad's in the house. He doesn't count. And that's part of the problem, is that we're not counting when we do this data. Like the numbers lie. You know, the numbers tell a story, but the numbers tell the story of the person who's looking at the numbers. So statistically, Black fathers are actually more engaged than any other race of fathers that they do categories on. More engaged than Hispanic fathers, more engaged than white fathers. We're very much already engaged with our children. And then through our fatherhood research, we also know that a father who is engaged is going to be of a benefit to the child, whether that father lives in the home, he's a custodial parent, or he's a non-custodial parent. Then what we teach, and Mrs. Stith will attest to this, that all you have to do is show up when you're supposed to show up. Mm-hmm. So if you're every other weekend dad, you just have to be every other weekend dad. Just show up on your weekends, and that child will benefit from the engaged father. So the first thing that I would say is, don't believe the narrative of what people say about you, because we rise or fall to the level of the expectations that are set for us. So if the expectation is that I'm not going to be there, that I'm not going to be consistent, at the first sign of trouble, then I'm going to fall away. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I would say, now we've gotten to this young father, he's getting ready to have a baby, what I'm going to tell him is, you can do it. It's very simple. You can do it. The research also says that for young people, all they need is one significant figure that's an adult that believes in them, right? So I'm an 80s baby. I was born in 1982. I'm born right in the middle of the crack epidemic. How many children of my generation were raised by their grandmothers or their aunts?
Mhm.
A lot of them.
Mhm.
And they
Yes.
turned out well
Mhm.
because the grandmother and the aunt served as that surrogate figure until either mom or dad got off of drugs. We did kinship care instead of foster care. So the children weren't in the system, they were with their relatives. And so then we say, okay, not only can your child have the life that you had, but by your very presence, your child has a better shot. The other thing that I would encourage that father to do is to develop a healthy relationship with the mother of the child. Doesn't have to be a girlfriend, doesn't have to be a wife, doesn't have to be a fiance. I don't keep up with generational terms, but it could be a jump off, whatever it is, for you to have a healthy relationship with that mother, because your child is going to get how they treat women, men, how they view relationships from what they see between you and the mom. So if you have a healthy co-parenting relationship, obviously it's going to be better and more beneficial if that healthy relationship is within the confines of marriage, just by virtue of the commitment. But we want to make sure that that child has the best chance. And then the last thing that I would say to them, and I'm sure we'll get to this again when we look at the mental health aspect, is you have to have some type of income. You absolutely have to have some type of income, and it has to be a steady income. You don't have to be rich, because, for our young people, then they're tempted to do things that are illegal or will cause them to become incarcerated. So it doesn't have to be that, but whatever it is, you have to have a steady income, something that you can count on, something that you can budget, something that the mother of your child and your child can look forward to in terms of consistency and provision. Later on, we'll talk about the downside when it comes to mental health, about men having to be stuck in the role of provider. But in terms of advice, at whatever level of education, at whatever level of understanding they have, I would point out that they cannot believe the hype, that their presence is absolutely valuable, and they have to contribute whatever it is that they can contribute.
Interesting points there.
Mhm.
Interesting points. So you hit a couple of them that I'd like to start off with. Is one, you're talking about the felonies that a lot of our Black men have. And we already know that there are two justice systems out there. And one where you got a felony for a low-level felony that I'm on the system, and so it affects me because it's in the computer. That means I can't get a security clearance. So I can't work for the city, I can't work for the state, and I can't work for the federal government. I can't even work for a contractor. So basically, I am not even a second class, I am a third class citizen of this country.
Mm-hmm.
Actually a fourth a class, because you're Black. So Blacks are always, as I say, third class anyway. So and when talk about two justice systems, I could get a felony for having 2 ounces of weed, but if I was white, I could storm the Capitol and get probation with no felony attached. Hit a cop, hit him with the baton or whatever, take his weapon and beat him half to death and get nothing happen to me. So, so we do have, we can make it clear, we do have two justice departments here. So the other piece that I'd like to point out is the money piece. Now, a lot of times you talk about, yes, we want to do some co-parenting, but when you get emotions connected to it, and then that relationship that was tight when I was making the baby degrades into now I'm into survival mode, and because I can't get a job, or I don't want a job per se because I want to hang with the fellas, everything degrades into what can I bring to the table. And so the young lady that's in that we're talking about, fictional young lady, which is tens of thousands of us across the nation, has to go into the system per se to get Medicaid so I can have some child care. Health care to have the baby delivered. And then I have to go also to the city to get housing, which you already said that, and he can't come live with me because
Because of the felony.
Right, because of the felony. And so, it's a multi complex problem that we're talking about there. And there's no easy fixes for it, other than the only fixes we've done over history for the decades is listen to the sound bites of the Confederates out there that saying all Black men are deadbeats and we need to keep them locked up. What say you?
All right. So I can actually break that down into
that was a mouthful, Colonel.
It was just two parts. There are two avenues. There are two avenues of attack. The primary thing is to instill in young men, because this precedes fatherhood. So the issues that cause relationships to falter come from a lack of self-esteem and self-worth and self-knowledge. I'm married. I'm 100% certain that if I lost my job, my wife would not leave me and she wouldn't make me feel like less than a man. I thought this to be true, but I know it to be true because since we've been together, I've taken pay cuts of $10,000 a year and $16,000 a year that I took pay cuts to do work that I love. The job I'm working right now, I took a $16,980 a year pay cut to do what I love, married with 2 kids and 2 car notes. So I'm confident that my partner would not leave me for money. The main thing is that I got to make sure I bring something in. We can take care of these kids, right?
Okay.
But that's
can I rephrase that for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you took that $16,000 cut, but you also did the math to say, can I do this, or can we do this? And then you did it as a couple,
right? But no, that's what I'm getting to. That's what I'm getting to.
Yeah, okay.
That actually come the reason why we're not, and it's not necessarily the math, it's the together thing. You're absolutely right. It's that we've had conversations. We've had conversations about dreams. We've had conversations about goals. And you hit on a point earlier, that survival mode. You can't think, you can't plan, and you can't grow in survival mode. Mm-hmm. Which means you probably shouldn't be having sex with somebody that you're not sure you want to marry if you're not in survival mode. Now, I'm a preacher, so I'm supposed to say abstinence, but my wife was also pregnant when we got married. So I understand the reality, right? That we need to spend more time talking to young men and young women, and I'm talking adolescent and pre-adolescent, before they start making these decisions that affect the rest of their life. Like it's easy for me to say now, oh yeah, if you vote, then life is going to be better for you. But if you make a decision that gets your voting rights taken away, and you happen to be in Virginia under a governor who doesn't care about restoring rights, then you're stuck at least 4 years after you have paid your debt to society before you can even begin a smooth process of restoring your rights, and then another 2 to 4 years before you can exercise those rights to make life better for yourself or for your children. All of that comes into fatherhood, and all of those things come into play before we ever have children. So in a system like this, or as Reverend Pastor Freddie Haynes says, these disunited states and the criminal injustice system, when you're dealing with something like that, then it behooves us as older adults, younger older adults and older adults, to have these meaningful conversations with our adolescents and our preteens about the consequences of decisions that they may not even be thinking about making, because and I believe I'm saying this right, what is it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Yes.
And so what we end up doing is we end up spending our time and our resources getting them off of the garbage heap and putting them back on their feet, when we could instead extend resources to have them set up to be happy and healthy. But because of the racial trauma that we have experienced, and the fact that we're accustomed to fighting back and combating situations, I don't think that we do the necessary planning. You brought up the abortion debate, which I will not publicly put my foot in right now, but from the pulpit, I may throw something out there. But what I will say is that plan and how they used Trump, that was a good 50 to 60 years in the making. You know, they have been packing the federal courts for a long time to ensure that when justices began to die and retire, they could get that majority. And they put people who were unqualified, like the judge in Florida that took the mask mandate away, endangering everybody. As we know, one of our own high schools shut down for a couple of days because of COVID, right? And so we have a judge that's in Florida that wasn't
no
qualified.
Experience. A judge with no experience, never tried a case,
appointed as a lame duck. And that stuff is set up. And they say it out loud and we don't pay attention. So I really do think that we need to spend more time. We need to spend more time planning, having conversations with our young people about their physical health, about their mental health, for those that are people of faith, about their spiritual health, about finances, about academics and how it can be used. I grew up under the belief that education was the great equalizer. And the more educated I get, the more I realize that's not actually true. Poverty is the great equalizer. All poor people struggle with the same things. All educated people do not have the same problems. But all poor people are going to have to deal with poor health, poor water quality, poor air quality, poor building maintenance, poor interactions with the police, substandard education, not for lack of great teachers, because we got some great teachers in poor schools, poor medical treatment when you combine racism into that. So a shorter life expectancy. And that's what comes from being poor. So we really do have to have these conversations, and we have to have them sooner. My father, Ms. Stipp knows, I did my presentation at the Reentry Council that the Oak Foundation hosted in Hampton on April 29th. My father passed away on the 25th. So like I totally redid my presentation. I sat there on the table and I did my presentation, from my mind. And I was able to do that because I was able to take the stuff that my mom had told me, that my father had told me, that my stepdad had told me, looked at what I had experienced working in the Hampton Regional Jail, the Portsmouth Jail, Virginia Beach Detention, Chesapeake Detention, and Norfolk City Jail, the speeches that I had given when I had gone to the jail in Chesapeake, and said, this is what I think reentry should look like going forward to benefit the whole family and the whole man first, and then the whole family. That information, in addition to my trauma-informed care training through the Up Center, which is where I got my start in fatherhood, the majority of that came from conversations I had with my father 20 years ago. And I was able to share that, which led to this invite 20 years later, 4 days after he died. That is how important it is, especially for fathers, to be fully engaged with their children, that my life's work with fathers is based on my father feeling abandoned by his father, and the rage and the hate and the hurt that he had for his mother because she was there. And we see that with a lot of young men when they have female principals and female teachers. The only man that they see is the custodian or the coach. And so they're having these issues with mom and grandma. And I was raised primarily by my mother. And when I went away to college, my dad was like, "You really gonna need me now." And we started talking, reading books like Fire in the Belly on being a man, and having these conversations about, we didn't know the word trauma. This is 2000, so we weren't talking about trauma, but the hurt and the anger. And that impacted me so much my freshman year at Norfolk State in 2000, that through 20 more years of depression, 3 children, a miscarriage, a separation and restoration, undergraduate degree in seminary, I'm still able to hold on to conversations that I had with my father 20 years ago. And that's the impact of an engaged father. Like, forget the stats. Yeah. I am the statistic. That is the impact that an engaged father will have on their child. That as my pastor says, that so many lessons are caught rather than taught. But when you take the time to sit and share those things, then it benefits. Because where I am now, y'all can just cut me off because I'm a talker. I shared this with my former supervisor, Caprice Elmore. She was my program manager at EVMS, where I serve as a fatherhood coordinator. And I was talking about the enthusiasm for the work that I do working with fathers. And I told her, I said, I am impacting 3 generations of fathers, 3 generations of family. She said, how so? I work with a father now. The research says that however you were parented, that's how you're going to parent. So my father that has a child either on the way or under 18 months, because that's the qualifications for our program, that you have to live in Portsmouth or Norfolk, be expecting a child or have a child under 18 months for our Healthy Start program. That father is going to parent based on what I teach him through this evidence-based curriculum. His child is then going to parent his or her child based on the same thing. So there are grandchildren that aren't born now that are going to benefit from stuff my dad and my mom taught me 20, 30 years ago.
So basically, what you just described is what I would say is like role modeling for the
Yes,
future.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so
Absolutely.
the other piece is that I just can't let it go away. You know, we talked about the relationship piece, especially of some of our teenagers when they get pregnant earlier on. It is a hard battle when you have 2 teenagers that have to fight what in psychology purposes, that id, you know, that primal id, as you know, in psychology, and that is something else to fight. And and so if you look at policy though, and when we talk about prevention, we're not teaching sex education and prevention like we were back in the, what I hate to say back in the day, because the Confederates and this new freedom thing saying I could do it at home. You know, they want this stuff taught at home, but they're not teaching it at home and or teaching it the right way. And so that's the word freedom. And so that's what we're seeing across the board, across this country. And the other thing I'd like to say is when we talk about the poor white person out there across this country, and I think there was a speech when Martin Luther King had made this, and I'm gonna paraphrase it: the poor white benefits from the same roads and the same poor educational school system, and et cetera, that if we improve all of that, we all benefit. But the other thing too is that same poor white person thinks if they live in a double wide and got a truck, and they perceive that they're doing better than you as a Black person, then life is good, because they will vote, which they have the power to, against their own self-interest, as long as it's keeping you down. And this is why a lot of the Confederates stay in office. And so you could agree, you know, that was a mouthful there.
So yeah,
that was a dissertation, Colonel.
I've seen some. My mother calls it, and I'm sure she got it from some other wise person in the family, where you cut off your nose to spite your face.
Your face. That's
yes.
right.
So yeah, I've seen that in other communities against us, and I've also seen that. I've also seen that in our community, that people won't vote their own interests; they'll vote against somebody else's. We did at our Fatherhood Symposium last year. This is 2022, so Fatherhood Symposium that we hosted last year. Our second day, we did a 2-day event, and the second day was on toxic masculinity. Is it a real thing? And one of the things that we uncovered, we already knew, the research says it, but we uncovered, is that the way that we're socialized has a great deal to do with the way that we are. So that's whether it's in race relations. As a social justice advocate, you know, I have to study those types of things, but it's also in terms of how we see ourselves as men and fathers. And I think that is, it's unfortunate, and it's toxic, and it's a reality that we have to deal with, that being Black means you're at the bottom. As a Christian, some Christian churches, some Christian denominations, some Christian preachers are very anti-LGBT. Like they're very, I happen to not be, but I am Black.
Mhm.
And my defense, without being forced to say what I do believe or I don't believe, I know no matter how you identify and where you identify and what you identify with, if you're Black, you're on the bottom.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so for us, it's like, if there is an injustice anywhere, as Dr. King says, then it's a threat to justice
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Mhm.
Yes.
The injustice against our Latino brothers and sisters, the injustice against our Native brothers and sisters, the injustices that occur against the poor whites in our country. You know, again, remember I said poverty was the great equalizer. So, and then the injustice that's done to the home. You brought up the point about mom needing to have services in order to have a healthy baby going to the doctor, right? In this fatherhood work, I found out very early on what medical racism does to families,
Mhm.
Black families in particular. It's very disheartening. Disheartening is the nicest I can say, because I don't know who's going to hear it. I don't
Mhm.
know, with y'all being my elders, if I could say it pisses me off, like I don't want to be disrespectful. But to know that somebody as rich and as well known as Serena Williams almost lost her life because the doctors wouldn't listen to her, to know that an OB died in her own hospital because the doctors wouldn't listen to her, assuming that we could take more pain. All of this goes into the fracture in the family. So as an example, if I know that that's the outcome, I'm 6 feet tall, just under 300 pounds. I think today I'm weighing in at 297, right? The goal is
Good
to get
job.
down
You're
to the,
doing it. You're
yeah, I
doing
was
it.
above 300, right?
You're
I'm
doing it.
working it, right? If I'm in the hospital and my wife is pregnant, to the fatherhood point and also to the access to resources point. If I'm in the hospital and my wife is complaining because she is in a lot of pain and she's not being treated. One, she's not going to get the pain medication that she needs. They're going to treat her like she is medication seeking. They're not going to take the pain. They're not going to take the pain seriously. If she gets belligerent, then she's an angry Black woman. If I get loud, they're calling security on me, and still both her health and the baby's health are at risk. Now, if I don't have a strong sense of self and purpose, I'm going to retreat from that environment. I'm going to leave her to have to handle that medical stuff alone, which will cause her to devalue me because I wasn't there to support her. And something as beautiful as childbirth will cause a fracture in the family. So now the family is fractured. We're no longer together. We have this antagonistic relationship because I cannot provide for her and I cannot protect her, because remember, in Western culture, the man is supposed to be a provider and a protector. I'll come back to that. That can no longer happen. Now she has to go to the very system that set the policies in place that broke us up to ask for help.
Exactly.
And the system is then going to punish him for her asking for help. So now we have further antagonism, because when she gets this TANF and all that stuff, they coming to get my check, whether I'm paying child support or not. And if I do anything out of the kindness of my heart for my child, that doesn't count. It doesn't count, right? Then I'm still considered to be a deadbeat just because I'm Black, right? So all of these things cause problems, and it makes her less likely to enter into a healthy relationship, because she's not going to want to enter into any relationship, because these relationships end up with children that she ends up having to take care of by herself. Based on his youth or his immaturity, his manhood is attached to his ability to procreate.
That's
And
right.
so now, and I'm not saying about Black men, I'm saying just men in general, then he has 3, 4, 5 kids. And now that child support check that each mom is getting is about $30 a month. And now he's working under the table, which, if you're going to make some money under the table, it's got to be something illegal. And so then we've perpetuated this cycle. As you talked about role modeling, then we have the modeling. Now the child is modeling this behavior. Our saving grace, I kid you not, has been grandmothers and aunties. So we talked about the modeling part, and I'll come back to the toxicness of the fathers, and even the fact that poverty produces great tragedy, such that Dr. King was killed marching for poor garbage workers.
Exactly.
Right? That the
Minister
government.
Jones, let me step in just for a second.
Absolutely.
I just want to, just for a second, want to change the direction just for a minute. You've been a minister for a while, and you just completed your master's in theology from the seminary. And, you know, we talked earlier about one of the things of going to the seminary, you get a chance as a minister to ask those tough questions and come out a better minister, a better message giver. You know, and I want to know, with all the things you're doing, the programs you're in, you know, religion is a big part of what you do. Your beliefs are a big part of what you do. And you run across, we talk about poverty, people in poverty, or people incarcerated. You know, sometimes the hope, their self-esteem is real low, and they might not even believe in Christ, because they'll say, what has Christ or what is religion done for me? Why would I be in this position if there was a God up there looking out for me? So how do you incorporate, you know, and plus the life you've lived? You know, I always say preachers that live a life, they have a lot more to give because they're coming from the same place in a lot of instances from those people that they deal with. So how do you incorporate your religious beliefs into the professionalism that you have to have when you're dealing in your social work and the other programs that you do to try to convince those people that God is still there for them, even though they have no hope?
That's a good one. I actually struggled with that one as I got older. You know, when you're young, you don't want to talk about your faith because you don't want to seem like a holy roller or holier than thou. And then, you know, as we get older, we tend to fall away before we come back to our senses. Now I just talk about the goodness. Like I'm just like, God gave me this job, and if I lose my job for talking about the Lord, then I just lose it, whatever. That's where I am now. But I also can make my own money tutoring. So I'm not dependent necessarily on a job. What I have found, though, because I've been very offended by Christians. Sometimes I don't talk about my faith at all. Sometimes I just talk about my life and what I have experienced. I have a therapist, she's awesome. I have a pastor, he's awesome. And so I have these conversations and I'm able to look back over my life. And one of my therapists, before this therapist, my therapist asked me, we had a heart to heart. He said, Mike, why didn't you kill yourself? I deal with suicidal depression, right? Why didn't you? And I let him know I've always had somebody that I could turn to. At every time I was suicidal, I had somebody that I could turn to. And then the things that I've seen, the things that I've experienced at this age, there's very few times I meet somebody where I haven't already experienced what they have been through, or I know somebody who's experienced it. So when I'm talking to the brother that's in jail, my brother's in jail. He ain't getting out. He got life. He's not getting out. It's not going to happen. I have friends and relatives, and I'm talking to somebody who has either experienced sexual trauma or who has a loved one or a spouse that's experienced sexual trauma. I have sexual trauma on both sides of my family, which is why I do the volunteer work that I do. When you have people who have experienced somebody being murdered, my little brother was murdered. I had to preach his eulogy. Those that have lost parents. I stood over my father and my grandfather and did their eulogies. I've dropped out of school. I've lost a child. Like all of them my mom has cancer now, right? Double mastectomy and the cancer is still spread, right? I have a child with special needs. So like a lot of things, especially with my generation and younger, a lot of the things that they're going through, I've already gone through it. I'm open about my mental health challenges. I'm open about my challenges with my weight, which are based on my mental health. And so I have credibility with them because I'm professional. I'm not going to be using like crazy language, but I'm very real with them. So then they have to ask the question that the jailer asked Paul when the jail shook and the chains fell off and the guard woke up and he thought everybody had escaped. He was getting ready to grab his sword and kill himself because if he didn't kill himself, they were going to kill him. And Paul cried out, "We're all here. Don't harm yourself." Mm-hmm. And then he ran to them and said, "What must I do to be saved?" Somebody's going to ask me how I made it, right? And then I can tell them. But they have to know that I've gone through something. They have to see that I've been through something. And how with the things, if you can make your therapist lean back and rub their hand through their hair, you done been through something. I've leaned the therapist all the way back on some stuff that I said, and I'm still here. And then I can say it was by the grace of God. And then they ask me, well, how can you do this? And I can say, I went into seminary questioning the existence of God, because I have loved ones who have been raped and molested, and they're wonderful people and they're wonderful Christians. And I'm asking myself, man, how can God exist and all of this stuff happen? It's the question of theodicy. Why does bad things happen to good people? And I wrestled with that. You're not supposed to go into seminary to find God, but I went to seminary to find God. I'm the only preacher I've ever known that went to seminary to find God, because I knew that either God did not exist or God did not exist as God had been explained to me.
You know,
And
Mike,
so
Mike, I'm thinking about all that you've been through. Your testimony is so amazing. And it just brings me back to the scripture that says, I know the plans I had for you.
Mhm.
And so sometimes the things that we go through is meant for us to go through so that we can be better at taking care of those who are around us.
Absolutely.
And because you went through that, now you're a true testimony to anybody who comes in contact with you. And I know that just through my experience of working with you and watching you and watching the work that you do.
I can give you a recent example of that. So we hear this, and I don't want take it to church, but we've heard the scripture, and I shared this with my church about 2 Sundays ago, that that you have a peace that passes all understanding. So I heard it, I've studied it, I've read it, but I deal with depression and anxiety. I've never in my life had a peace that passes understanding. Like, I've dealt with suicidal depression since I was 16, and I'll be 40 in August. I've never had a peace that passes understanding. I've rarely had peace because either the outside circumstances were acting up, or my brain, which is wired, where I'm not getting enough of the natural chemicals. I've been off since I was a child. Well, my dad had cancer. My mom has cancer, and I'm going to the colorectal surgeon, and I'm already raised to my 3rd blood pressure medicine because the stress of the impending demise of my father, family drama, job drama. Y'all know how this is life, right? Where for a whole week I'm running at 190 over 100 blood pressure consistently. And those of us that take blood pressure medicine, we know it's not working in 30 minutes. That stuff needs to sit in your system for a little while. I take my blood pressure on the way to the colorectal surgeon, sitting there scared by myself, and take it about 30 minutes before I get there. So I know it's not going to work, but I at least want to be able to tell the doctor I took my medicine. I get in there and my blood pressure is so low, I don't believe it. I make them take the other arm. They take the other arm and it's like 120 over 82, which is perfect.
Perfect.
I'm getting ready to have an exam where guys don't want to be examined at, preparing for a biopsy, which is going to be tomorrow. And I'm as calm can be. And then it clicked me. He will keep you in perfect peace.
Yes, he will.
So now, because I'm at that age with lung cancer, breast cancer, liver cancer, and either prostate or colon cancer in my immediate family from grandparents down, the likelihood that I'm going to develop, if we're looking at the stats, I'm a candidate for cancer, and I've already had diabetes and worked my way out of diabetes. I have mental health challenges and I have fibromyalgia. So statistically, I'm not going to live to be an old man because I have co-occurring disorders. And yet and still in the doctor's office, preparing for this conversation for this biopsy, my BP is at 120 over 82. So when I talk to somebody and they say I got to go have a biopsy, yeah, I understand. When I talk to somebody who's had their heart broken or betrayed, I understand. And what I know, and I know Ms. Stith knows, and I'm sure you all know, is that our brothers and sisters behind bars, they're regular people.
That's right.
And the problem is, and I know this is not true for you, we don't treat them like regular people. But they have regular people problems. Regular people problems brought them into jail. Regular people problems they encounter while they're in there. And then regular people problems smack them in the face the day that they walk out. So if I present myself as the regular person that I am, like, I'm not going to be like with my children, they now have to call me out. The joke is you will call me master because I got a master's divinity. But on the streets, I'm just Mike Jones. And, when I become a pastor, I'll be like the white pastors. I'll be Pastor Mike, right? That'll be what it is. When I'm talking to my brothers and sisters in jail, I'm another brother. I'm another brother who's got parents that have went to jail, siblings that have gone to jail. And so, Mr. Overton, that's how I do it. I am a far better communicator about me than I am about God. I will not be so presumptuous as to say that I understand everything there is to know about God. I am still growing in my faith. I don't believe everything that the Bible says. And the more that I learn, the less that I believe, and I have to be comfortable with, and me and my pastor talk about it, is me not necessarily believing something to be specifically true when it's probably poetry, has nothing to do with my faith in Jesus Christ, right? And I got to be able to stand on that. Like, I still believe, you know, he was born of a virgin, he lived, he died, he rose again, he coming back. Like, we can bank on that. The Anglicans, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, let's hang our hats on that right there. And then just live a life where my light shines, as the Bible says, that good men may see my good works, because it doesn't say good people see your Father in heaven's works. It says see your good works.
See your good works.
See my good works.
Amen.
And in that brings glory to God.
Exactly.
So what you call humility, I call the benefit of living with depression. Because I honestly think if I were a little healthier, if I were a little wealthier, or I were a little handsomer, I'd be a jerk. So I thank God that, that I am where I am.
That's why God had the plans and not your plans, okay?
Because God knew if I didn't have fibromyalgia and they gave me a basketball scholarship, I wouldn't be no good to nobody. Not until 40. Definitely not.
Mike, I have a question, and I know
Yes,
I'm going away from what we were talking about just for a minute, though, because I'm at loose ends as to what to say to these young boys around here who are getting all these little girls pregnant. I talked to one young man maybe about 2 years ago who was bragging to me how he had 5 young ladies in the same school pregnant at the same time. And it was like notches on his belt. You know, what do you do for these young boys who are out here? And we got to hold the young girls accountable too, because young girls can really turn that guy around if they want them to, you know. But what do we say to these young men?
Okay, so first let me go to your second and then come back. I think the responsibility is more on the young men than the young women. Yes. We put a lot of undue pressure, both inside the church and outside the church, on young girls to behave in a chaste way, right? But I know somebody, you know them too, that just confessed to me that part of the reason they had a baby was because they thought that the baby would love them unconditionally.
I hear it all the time. I hear it all the time, Mike.
And this is one of the sharpest young ladies that I've ever met. And she said, and those babies are the most selfish creatures I've ever seen. So what she's doing is she's trying to fill a void with the baby. And what he is doing is he's trying to fill the void with the sex. And that's the thing that we miss. It's the notch in the belt is not about the baby.
No.
If we get to the heart of it, it's the love. I bet you the majority of these young men who are getting these girls pregnant, because we live in the same community, that they have loving mothers. Who have experienced some type of trauma. And what he is doing, and I know this because I did it, he's trying to get the love outside that he could not get from his mom, or trying to replace the void from his father not being there. So what we have to do is we have to have conversations with them, and we have to put them in a position where they feel safe being vulnerable. He needs to cry. He needs to cry and say he's scared and he feels helpless and that he's alone. If we can put him in, and it's on us, we have to create an environment where these young men, back to it, Mr. Chapman, that toxicness, we have to get them to a point, and we talked about this at the workshop, where he reevaluates what it means to be a man. Like, you're not a man because you can have a whole bunch of babies. If we're going to go 80s boys in the hood, you're a man because you can provide for that child. But even the provision point, like when this kid is up, so we talk about the kids, but I myself, part of the reason that my wife and I had problems that I didn't realize was, and me and my mom, we talk about it. So I've gotten her permission to share this. So when she gets on here, she be acting funny, but she'll attest to it. I've been given permission to share stuff for the other benefit of people. There are certain things that my mom could not do emotionally when she was younger because of her trauma. Well, I'm a child and I don't understand that. So what I looked for in my wife was to do what my mom could not do. And so I put that mother stress on my wife, who is her own independent person with her own issues. And when she couldn't live up to that standard, then we began to have conflict, regardless of whatever else she brought to the table. That was on me. And that would have easily been resolved by me entering into therapy sooner. So this is why this is that experience, Mr. Overton, that we talked about, where how you can talk to somebody through your testimony, that I almost lost my family because I was wounded in a place that I did not understand.
Exactly.
I happen to have been raised in an environment by my mom and my dad and my stepdad where I was safe saying how I felt. I couldn't talk back, but I could talk first, right? So I could say that I was scared or that I was afraid. I just went and told my wife, I'm really scared about the results of this biopsy. And her response was, let's just get to the biopsy. Let's worry about the results later.
Yes.
But there are a lot of guys who don't have that.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's up to us to create an environment for these young men. It's too late for them in that they already have 4 or 5 kids, but it's not too late for them going forward to learn the skills, to select a partner that's going to be healthy for them and for their child. It's not too late for them to go to first college, because Portsmouth is awesome in terms of offering that opportunity, and get an associate's before they graduate high school, or get a trade, especially if they ain't got no felony, like Mr. Chapman said, and they can get these government contracts. They can go to the shipyard, and yeah, they're not going to have as much money as they wanted to, but all of their children will be provided for, and they'll have healthy relationships with the mothers of their children and the grandmothers of their children, because that's who's really raising these teenage babies, you know, and then they can look themselves in the mirror and say that I accomplished something. But then we can't condemn them for it. It's like a girl getting pregnant and then yelling at her the whole pregnancy because she's pregnant. Well, the time to talk about pregnancy planning and prevention was before she got pregnant.
Exactly.
So now we're beating these young people up because of the decisions that they made. Same thing we do, and Miss Death will attest to it. Same thing we do to the brothers that are in jail. We beat them up about the decisions they made, but they're already in jail. The decisions already made.
They're already there.
Now, what are we going to do to make sure that they don't come back, or we reduce the number of times that they come back? And the key to that is to treating them like they're people, or to acknowledging that I'm pretty sure that I've driven 85 and a 35 somewhere, not that bad, but you know what I'm saying? I've broken some laws. And if I haven't broken the laws of man, I've definitely broken the laws of God and had grace extended to me.
And Mike, let me just say one thing too, while we're talking about these young men and these young women. Dr. Hunter and I at the Pines Residential Treatment Center, we had a group that we called Healthy Masculinity, and one called Healthy Femininity, where I would work with the young women, he would work with the young men, and then periodically we would bring the young men and the young women together.
Okay.
And one young lady, and it stayed with me forever, and I tell you, she just caught me off guard, because when we brought her in and they had, the young ladies had to talk to the young men, and they were talking about sex and they were talking about love. They were conversing with each other. And one young lady said, young men use love to get sex. Young women use sex to get love. And that's where our young people find themselves today. The very same place. You know, each one searching, but just going about it in the wrong way.
You put those two together and create another life.
Exactly.
Another life with a void. And that is, and it's so interesting that because I'm very wary. I don't think I can help it, being a Black male. I'm very wary of generalizations and stereotypes, but they do come from somewhere, sometimes nefarious and sometimes true. But I experienced that in terms of because of my mom is just like, if y'all meet my mom's just like the bomb, like she's the bomb. And then I've had phenomenal women, Black and white, and Asian in my life, both as peers and as mentors. And so I always had a very high, I didn't idolize, but I idealized women, especially Black women. And so for me, and then, you know, I was raised to respect a woman's body and a woman's choice of what to do with their body. So for me, the highest compliment that a girl, now a woman, could give to me was if they gave me their body as the highest. So I felt loved when I had sex.
You know something?
That was me.
Mm-hmm.
With all the fantastic female relationships that I had that were non-sexual, with the great loving relationship that I had with my mother and my sisters and all of that stuff. If I was in a relationship with a young lady and she chose for whatever reason not to engage in sexual relations with me, I took it personally, it hurt me, and it caused me to feel invalidated. And it took a long time for me to figure that out, and, you know, a good therapist, so that I could work through that, so that it wasn't something that hurt me, and that I'd be prepared to have these conversations with other people. And in seeing that, then when I look at younger people, and it's like, yeah, you're chasing love because somebody didn't have a conversation. Somebody didn't have a conversation with you about love, because mom and dad didn't experience a healthy love, or mom and dad didn't witness a healthy love, because it doesn't have to be unhealthy for it to be not healthy. It could just be, you know what I'm saying? It ain't got to be abusive.
Yeah.
It could just be.
That's it.
And when you see that and your soul, your spiritual heart says something is wrong with that, then you go out looking for something more. And now I know 35, 38, 40, 42-year-old men who are, for the first time in their lives, entering into healthy relationships, where every relationship prior to this has been unhealthy because they didn't have a model of what a happy, healthy relationship looked like. I was in my late 20s, early 30s before I could interact with somebody that I thought had a happy, healthy. Pastor Sean Wynn and his wife, Lady Thelma Wynn. I graduated when I was 30. So I was between 27 and 30 years old before I could look at a couple, see them publicly and privately, because, you know, when you're a child, you don't see the private stuff, right? But see them public and privately and be like, oh my God, they like each other. Like I was already married with children before I saw a relationship. Pastor Sean Wayne, he's my guy. Before I saw a healthy relationship. Imagine what would have happened if I wasn't raised by a mom that taught me to respect women and to respect women's body and all of that stuff. What kind of damage I could have done if I thought that toxic was normal. Right. And so going back to fathers, and even, you know, as ministers and as police officers and fire chiefs and basketball coaches, and to my benefit, custodians, right? Like, it behooves us as men, regardless of whether or not we think they're going to listen, it's on us to say something. Like we have to talk to them about appropriately, right? Appropriately about their physical health, about their emotional health. That was the health I missed earlier, Mr. Chapman, about their sexual health. And you're right, living in a society, and let me know if I'm going on too far, but living in a society that prizes individual rights, there is a danger to that, because individual rights does not compound ignorance. And if you don't know and you don't want to know, then you're not going to teach.
Exactly.
Like our children, they're learning about race. Like my children are 15, 12, and 7 now, and I've had to talk with all of them. We're going to have that talk. And my daughter and I, the 15-year-old, we've talked about sex, engaging her interest, and letting her know that we have to be able to talk. When my daughter was in elementary, I talked to her about the possibility of her being a lesbian, and I don't care who you like, I need to know, because domestic violence happens in same-sex relationships. Because as a father, my job is to protect you, right? So I need to create a safe environment. So when a little boy in 6th grade touched on her butt and it wasn't appropriate, she knew she could tell me, you know, because daddy's gonna show up. You know, I also had to stop telling her if somebody touched her, I'd kill him, because she told me that she wouldn't tell me, because she really believed that I'd kill somebody over her. And so that's like even these kind of conversations. In seminary, I had to talk to some of my classmates, like, when you're had a spouse die, don't tell your kids they mama went to a better place, because I read about two little kids that got in the bathtub and tried to drown themselves.
So they can get
so
to
they
that
could be with
place where
their
their
mom.
mother is.
We're not thinking about that kind
That's
of stuff,
right.
about what
That's
it is
right.
to where they are in their development. And so
Mhm.
I'm really grateful now for all of the things that I've been through. I wasn't necessarily happy going through it. I did learn some of these lessons, kicking and screaming. But again, I have a great therapist, I have a great pastor, I have a great wife. I had two fantastic academic advisors at the seminary, Dr. Jansen and Dr. Brown, who really pulled me across the line. I had great professors. My mom is one of the sharpest women that you'd ever want to meet. You know, I've had the benefit of having three men to love me as a son, my father that raised me, my biological father, and my stepfather, two of whom have gone on to be with the Lord. And, you know, getting back to what we originally talked about in terms of mental health, like really, really being honest about where they are, where they were, what struggles they had, not wanting to see me make the same mistakes, but make all new mistakes, which is what I want for my daughter. You know, I told my daughter, the 15-year-old, I was like, you're gonna have to do crack or something. Because it's something I ain't done. Like, you will not make the mistakes that I do. You're gonna talk to a therapist, you're gonna exercise, you're gonna be in shape, you're gonna eat right, you're gonna have to do something different than what daddy did. And so I'm really fortunate. Like I said, at graduation, I feel like a turtle on the fence post. Like I don't belong here, and somebody had to set me here. I said to my pastor, like, I really clearly, since y'all let me go to church, I very clearly in this last year have seen God everywhere I was supposed to see God, and that's cool. But I've also seen God in some very unexpected places.
That's right. That's right.
And it is in those unexpected places, in the midst of crying spells and panic attacks and grief. My biological father died shortly after undergrad. My father that raised me died the week of my finals for seminary. And yet here I stand or sit in my closet office in outer space with you lovely people. Because somebody took the time to sit and talk to me. My seminary professor, Dr. Eric Williams, I texted him. I was on with Dr. Jansen. She's wonderful. Dr. Jansen, Dr. Brown, they're wonderful. I was texting her. I could not stop crying on Friday. And I texted him. I was like, I can't stop crying. I need you to call me. This man called me, got a full-time job and is a professor. And he called me and I told him, I said, listen, I don't need any favors. I don't need any shortcuts. I just need you to tell me that I can do it, because you know me and you know what I've been through. And he said, Mike, you can do this. And I believed him. And my wife sat at that dining room table from 5 p.m. until 2 o'clock. I'm gonna tell her that story like the story of the woman who washed Jesus' feet with her hair. Like, my wife sat there from 5 o'clock at night on Friday till 2 o'clock in the morning. She got up to use the bathroom and to feed me, and sat at that table so I could finish 2 out of the 3 papers that I needed to get done. Because she knew that I needed her there. Like, I really needed, like my psyche, I needed her. I needed to be able to look up. And if we can tell these young dads or these young men who are going to end up being dads that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to need somebody, that it's okay, like my pastor said, to cry. I called Easter Sunday morning. I had a panic attack and I cried my eyes out. And I thank God I wasn't at home, because I'd have freaked my wife out and I'd have scared my kids. And my pastor talked to me for 10 minutes, said it was okay, it was normal. He said, it's going to happen again when you're by yourself, because it's just been a lot. And it's okay. Like, we need that. We need other men to say, it's okay to cry. I told my pastor I'm going to thank him publicly in June. This is related to the mental health piece. My pastor, I've been with him. I started as an intern in 2018. Suicidal depression the whole time.
Give a shout out to him.
My pastor, the Reverend Hugo Morrison, H.J. Morrison, pastor of Union United Church of Christ in Norfolk, 877 Gulf Street, in the Huntersville community. The U Church, where you belong, that's where I'm at, where I've been fortunate, took me on as an intern in the middle of a crisis of faith. And I mentioned this to him. My pastor has never, as long as I've been with him, prayed for me about my depression. Never. And some people will be insulted by that. From my pastor, that was a sign of respect. And one day when I asked him about it, because I was just like, I was surprised, but I wasn't offended. I didn't mind. He said, Mike, you know Jesus. I know you can pray. call your therapist, and then walked away. Like my pastor, he just said, call your therapist and walked away. This is not a God thing. This is a mental health thing. Jesus will fix it after you talk to your therapist.
Yeah.
He put your therapist there to help you.
Go see your therapist. My pastor and my deacon, Dennis Stamoulis, have walked up on me like they were going to beat me up because I was working 2 jobs. I was working at Virginia Beach Psych overnight and I had a full-time job, and I had my 3 kids half the week because me and my wife co-parented excellently while we were separated. And they both told me, you're working too much. Deacon Denny is the hardest working man I've ever met. He's like the James Brown of work. And I told my pastor, if Deacon Denny say I'm working too much, I'm working too much. I quit that job, right? Because I had people that care about me. And that's what, as men and fathers, we need other men. The same thing with domestic violence and sexual trauma. And we don't need the courts. We don't need statistics. We need other men to hear their homeboys talking about the mother of their children, calling her the B word and saying what I'm gonna do to her because she put me on child support. And we need to check him because he respects us, right? And we check him before he does something crazy, like guns are down in the parking lot, her and her mom, or before he abandons his children because he feels like less than a man, or before he has to prove his manhood with somebody with a badge and a baton, right? We as men need to step up for other men. That's why, to your point earlier, Ms. Div, I was like, nah, like I'm not gonna put the girls getting pregnant on them. I'm not gonna do that because I'm gonna penalize them for getting pregnant and then talk about them when they engage in something such as survival sex, right? Because they're having sex to provide for their children. And then they're going to be all kind of B's and H's and all of this stuff when she's simply trying to survive because homeboy on to the next girl in the next community.
That's right.
Or we can tell her that we love her and back her up, and we can tell him that we love him and prop him up and let him know that it's okay to be vulnerable. So we really have to revamp, or as we said in the conference, we need to revision. As we were revisioning reentry, we need to reimagine what it looks like to be a man. I'm looking at my face now and it's like I feel like I'm mad about it because if I had my basketball coach, Victor Wallace, Vallejo High School. I remember one day, I had late 90s when we started getting phones in our room, right? So the kids, when we finally was able to have our own phone. One Saturday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, my basketball coach called me 6 o'clock in the morning. Jones, I just called to say I love you. Hung up the phone. Like that was 1999, 2000. 22, 23 years later, I still remember that. Because this man that I loved as a father, who was my basketball coach, you know how basketball coach is going to players.
Oh, yeah.
You know it's going to be some cuss words and some.
Oh, you know it's going to be plenty of cuss words.
But I never forgot that. Like those types of things, we need more intentional men like Pastor Morrison and more intentional men like Coach Wallace and more men like Dean Kinney and Dean Guns who will ask questions and give you space. Like Mr. Overton said, ask those questions and give you the space to wrestle with them. More people like Pastor Morrison and Lady T. Lady T's philosophy was, I believe in Jesus and a therapist. And I'm pretty sure if she ain't made a t-shirt that says it, she's going to make one because that's what it takes for us to be healthy men and healthy fathers.
Well, James, could you see
Mr.
why
Jones,
I wanted, I wanted Minister Jones on here with us today?
Indeed, and I'm glad you did.
And now you can understand also why Colonel Waters told me you have to find Mike Jones because we're getting ready to start reentry again, and we need him to do our fatherhood program. So, Colonel Waters I knew from the first time working with Mike, and after he did that session in Hampton, I knew that we had to get Mike here on our program. And James and Colonel, we didn't even hit half the stuff that we need to talk to Mike about.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We're going to wind down now, but we're going to have a part 2. We talked about having part 2s before, but this is definitely a time for part 2. And we're going to wind down, but we're going to give everybody a chance to have closing statements and I'm gonna call you Michael because after your conversation, I feel a friend, and especially after realizing that you spoke to our civic league back in 2017, and I saw the promise in you then, but I didn't know where you went from there. But I want to say I'm glad you mentioned about your mental health challenges and what you did to deal with it as far as seeing a clinician, and also what Pastor Martin said about, see your therapist, because oftentimes people mix up, they say, well, I'm just going to go to my pastor and see if that can be fixed. But you need that in conjunction with a professional to help you really deal with that.
Exactly.
And another thing we always miss, we talk about our young people, and sometimes that be the root of where some things start. And people don't realize that they are pediatric clinicians, mental health clinicians out there. And we think about treating adults, but we never think about those young kids that it might, just like you said, some things didn't happen for you until you started that therapy. And imagine starting that therapy at a young age, and parents just have to educate themselves and be aware and being able to recognize some things in their children that might need some help. And we often don't. And next time you come back with a part 2, we'll talk about therapy for even younger people that are dealing with some things that they hold inside. So thank you for mentioning yourself and what you've done in order to deal with your mental health and all those other things that you mentioned. It would have taken most people over the top, but you realized you needed help and went out and got it. And it saved your marriage. It probably saved your life. So
absolutely.
We appreciate you for that. So
thank you, sir.
Right.
Colonel?
Yeah, and most excellent, and I guess I could talk to you and we could debate stuff back and forth. We could be out here all night. But one of the things that that struck me is everything that's happened in your life. Each time something happened, it built on what I call your resilience that helped you through the next thing.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
And so I just wanted to make that point clear, and because so many people, when things happen, they crumble or they don't learn from what the past event that occurred to them, and things spiral out of control rather than building up the resilience and taking a negative and turning it into a positive. And the other thing too, and from an academic standpoint that you've discussed, and it rolls back to some of the things you've discussed, is what we call evidence-based practice. And when you use research and statistics in a problem, and you've done that, and so I just got to point that too out there. But as I know we're running over time, but I'd like to thank you and keep doing what you're doing. And I look forward to next time you're coming out here, because I got some stuff for you.
I'm looking forward to it. I actually don't think that I disagree with anything that you said. So there's no debate. There's no debate from me here. So
well, maybe debate is that, but our discussions.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Yes, because we can discuss till I can stay up all night and discuss stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike, I want to say I am so thrilled today that Dana brought you over to the sheriff's office so that you could be a part of our program, our reentry program. I am really looking forward to reentry starting up again, and you're coming in there to talk to our young men. I call them our young men. I don't refer to them as inmates or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to the day when you will come back to talk to our young men and encourage them, to give them encouragement that they need. Because I often tell them, we want you out of here. We don't want you to ever come back. We don't want you to put us out of business. Put us out of business. We don't want to see you incarcerated. So, Mike, I look forward to working with you. And one thing I must mention at this time also, Mike has a fantastic tutoring service. If your children are in need of tutoring, he has a dynamic program. Mike, could you give the site for your tutoring service, please?
Yeah, actually, because I just got somebody blessed me with a website. So now I have to find it because I don't know what it is by heart.
But
So if you give me a moment.
while
But yeah,
he's looking for that, I just
while I'm
want to
pulling it up, I will say, especially with regard to that. So the organization, I've been fortunate to work with two organizations in terms of the reentry work, and that was the Up Center, and then of course the Oat Foundation, where Dana Watson is the director of programs for their volunteer work, and she was also my supervisor when we did the program, and so I've been fortunate to be connected to good people who had a heart for service, because some people, they do it for the money, whatever money is in there, and then there are others who have a heart for the people, and so I've been really fortunate to do that work with the Oat Foundation. My website, it's one of the Wix sites, and so the website is HR Legacy, like Hampton Roads Legacy, HRLEGACY .wix which is WIXSITE.com/support SUPPORT. You can read information about me and my program on there. I have the calendar feature disabled so people don't just jump in and schedule themselves, but it actually tells you on the website how to do it. And I try to provide a reasonable cost service. My hope is that the people who need it can get it, so I make it affordable. But I'm just trying to do some good, and hopefully with my hopefully look good while I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, thank you so very much. And you definitely did more than I had expected, believe me.
Yeah.
And you have encouraged a lot of souls out here on today. And I do indeed look forward to the day when you will return and we can go further into some of the things that you have done and some of the services that you provide. So I want to say once again, I thank you so very much. And I appreciate you. And I think next Thursday, Mike, we have Miss Kim.
Okay.
You remember Miss Kim
Yes, this is gonna.
The program as well that we went to at
Yeah.
Hampton Road.
So yeah, you guys are on the roll.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
So
looking forward to her
I'll
as
be
well on
tuning
next
in.
Thursday. But I want to say once again, thank you so very much. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you, James, for agreeing to with my suggestion for this week. And I think he did an outstanding job.
Thank you all.
I think so
Yeah.
too.
We look for those contributions from our hosts to bring interesting people like you did today, Leah, and did you have, especially last week,
Yeah, and I got a good
your
one for you.
granddaughter.
And I have a good one for you next week as well. Next
Yes,
Thursday.
we're looking
Next
forward to
Thursday.
that as well.
Uh-huh.
And thanks everybody again, and join us this Monday morning at 6:30 on our morning show. I ran into this lady when I was filming a story about autism at Churchland High School about 2 Saturdays ago.
Saturdays ago. Mhm.
Yeah, about adult autism, and I ran into this lady, and she's going to be a guest. We have many communities in the city of Portsmouth that often get together and celebrate their communities or do things together. But we have a lot of apartments in the city of Portsmouth where people live there as well that are communities within themselves. And this lady, she's the manager of West Winds out in Churchland, and they've been having a successful community day for their apartment for the last few years. And I wanted to bring, her name is Sarah Ogle, and I wanted to bring her on because one of the things she told me that one of the people in a surrounding neighborhood told her, consider the people in the apartments those people. And they are citizens just like anybody else. And I think many of us started out in apartments. So
That's true. That's true.
at some point, and some people choose to live in apartments.
Exactly.
So hopefully this will be an interesting conversation, and I think it's something that not many people cover. We just overlook the fact that they are small communities too. They might not pay real estate taxes, but they pay taxes in some form or fashion.
Exactly.
So join us next Monday as we will have her as our special guest, and we will talk about that issue. Thanks again, Minister.
Thank you. Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.
Oh, we got to finish with our.
Oh yeah, and shout out to Norfolk State and VUU
Yes.
Behold, go Panthers.
Behold Panthers and
Behold the green and gold. Okay.
Yes.
And James, for some coffee talk.
Portsmouth Coffee Talk is here for our voice
Our community
In our future.
and our future.
and our future. And we thank you all and take care and God bless you. We'll
Thank
see
you. And
next time.
thank you, Mike. I appreciate you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you.